So Google recently released the Gemini CLI, which is basically an open source AI agent which runs locally on your machine. And I think it was actually inspired by Claude Code. I do not know that. I'm just guessing, basically. But there's also OpenAI Codex, so I do not know. But there's been a lot of buzz with some developers finding it's as good, if not better than Claude Code, while others are pretty disappointed. I guess you can't make everyone happy, basically. But they're actually disappointed about its performance when it comes to complex tasks, not simple tasks or any tasks, just mostly complex tasks. So is this the future of coding or just another overhyped tool? So in this two-part video, we're not just going to be talking about it, we're going to put it to the test. And for the first part, which is this video you're currently watching, we'll take a hands-on approach to the Gemini CLI. We will cover the installation and some of the commands it has, what it can actually do. And another thing we're going to be doing is creating a landing page, a simple landing page, and then we'll also update that. And then at the end, we're going to use Gemini CLI to update an existing code base, a larger code base. So that's what we're going to do in this particular video. For the second part, we're going to use Gemini CLI to create a GUI that's based on PyQt6. That's basically a Python framework for Gemma 3N. That's basically Google's latest on-device multimodal model, and that's what we're going to be covering in the next video, because I do want to cover that on a very different video. And at the end of the day, we're going to see if Gemini CLI is really what the hype. At its core, the Gemini command line interface is basically free and open source, like it says here. And the Gemini CLI brings Gemini directly into developers' terminals. That means it's actually powered by the Gemini family of models with unmatched access for individuals. And I think they're talking about this. The fact that they have actually made it available free of charge with 60 model requests per minute and 1K model requests per day. Open source, basically the Apache 2.0 license. So it's really cool, especially since it's available free of charge and the generous model requests per minute and per day. And another thing that's also awesome is the fact that it can interact directly with your local file system, execute shell commands, and automate complex multi-step tasks. Like it says here, now in preview, Gemini CLI provides powerful AI capabilities from code understanding and file manipulation to command execution and dynamic troubleshooting. So it offers a fundamental upgrade to your command line experience, enabling you to write code, debug issues, and streamline your workflows with natural language. So before we dive into the installation process, let's be honest about who this tool actually serves. Now, the Gemini CLI appeals more to two distinct groups of users, and I think the first group are people who are too lazy or haven't taken the time to actually learn and understand coding principles and programming fundamentals. Now, if you fall into this category, you might be better served by visual tools like website builders or Microsoft Word. I'm actually kidding, but now for the second group, I think these are experienced developers who've grown tired of writing boilerplate code, or they just want to rapidly prototype their ideas. Now, these are developers working on side projects, experimenting with new technologies, or they just simply want to accelerate their workflow, or maybe they are just too lazy to write code or something. Anyways, I'm actually kidding. Now, for this group, Gemini CLI can be a legitimate productivity multiplier. So the key difference is understanding versus convenience, or just pure laziness, basically. So if you're actually using this as a shortcut to avoid learning and understanding, you would likely hit a wall really quickly, especially as the code base gets large and more robust. That's what I think. But if you're using this to speed up work you already understand, and maybe you do know the language really well, then this becomes a really powerful ally. Now let's dive into the installation of Gemini CLI. Let's head over to your GitHub repo for the installation. We'll click on try now, and this should open your GitHub repo. Now, to actually install Gemini CLI, you can run any of these two commands. You can use npx or npm. Since this is node-based, that means this is basically a JavaScript application or JavaScript tool. Now, something to take note of is the prerequisites. You should make sure you have Node.js version 20 installed, or something higher than that. So let's use npm. So this should actually install Gemini CLI globally. As you can see, that's why we have this flag here, and this should actually run Gemini. And I'm going to be using VS Code. I have an empty project directory which I have opened on VS Code. You can use your terminal directly, but I'm going to be using the VS Code terminal. I have it open here. Now let's paste in the command, hit enter, and let's wait. Now we can actually select the theme. I honestly do not know which theme to go for. I think I prefer this. So you can actually log in with Google, or you can use the Gemini API key, and I think you would need the .env file or something, but let's use login with Google, and I think it should open up our browser. So we can actually select whatever Gmail account or whatever Google account we have already logged in. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to skip this part basically. I'm going to be using login with Google. You can use whichever one you want. You can use the Vertex AI or Gemini API key. Now let's log in with Google. So once you've signed in, you should get to this page. That's Auth Success Gemini. Basically saying Gemini Code Assist and Gemini CLI are now authorized to access your account. Really simple and straightforward. That's if you used login with Google. Now let's close this up and head back to VS Code. So now we can actually use Gemini CLI. For our first test, we're going to ask the agent to create a modern responsive HTML landing page, maybe for a tech startup, call it NeuroFlow. So let me just paste that in. I won't actually give it any more context. I won't tell you to use Tailwind CSS, but that's what I wanted to use. So let's just see what it actually does. I'll always allow. So it's actually done. I'm going to open up the index.html in my browser. So let's do that. So this is the landing page it actually created, NeuralFlow AI. It's really ugly, like really ugly. Now, since I want a much better looking landing page, I want to actually use Tailwind CSS via the CDN and many other stuff I want to actually add. I could easily pass in the instructions through this terminal, or I could use another cool feature of the Gemini CLI. So that feature is the Gemini Markdown files, a very neat feature, and it actually helps for personalizing the agent's behavior and also setting up project rules because it serves as context for the agent while you're working on that particular project. So it's a very simple Markdown file. You can just create it here, like I said. You can provide custom persistent instructions or rules to the Gemini 2.5 Pro model or whatever model you're actually using. Mine is Gemini 2.5 Pro. So let's quit this, and as you can see, when we actually quit it, we have some details here. Number of tool calls, success rate, user agreements, blah blah blah. Now let's call Gemini again, and this time we're going to pass in the same instruction that we did earlier. So it's going to be using the gemini.md file. So we are asking it to do the same thing, create a modern responsive HTML landing page for a tech startup called NeuralFlow AI. So it's using gemini.md file. Let's see if it will actually use Tailwind via the CDN to work on this. So we're going to tell it to always allow. So it's done. As you can see, it says I have created a landing page for NeuralFlow AI. It includes a hero section, features, a call to action, and a contact form. That's what we actually asked it to do in Gemini.md. We asked it to create a hero section, call to action, and contact form. Now, we also asked it to use a dark theme with purple blue accent. And we also asked it to create a gradient background. And if we go back to index.html, it did just that here. BJ gradient to right. I think it's from left to right. Anyways, another thing we actually asked you to do here is use Tailwind CSS via CDN and also a custom CSS file. So it used Tailwind CSS and it also has a styles of CSS custom file, which is really, really cool. Now let's preview the index.html in our browser. So as you can see, we have the gradient. Blue and purple with dark theme. It's not bad. Everything is really centered, but it's still really horrible. Now, what I'm going to tell you to do is change the opacity of the hero section and give the hero section a background image. So it's still going to have the gradient, but also the background. Let's head back to our IDE. So let it start. So let's see if it actually does a good job at that, and it's downloading the asset. I think it's trying to get a HD abstract technology background image. Okay, I think it's actually using pixels. It's just calling it directly. It's not really downloading the image. So it said I have updated the hero section with a background image and an opacity of 0.5. You can now see the changes by refreshing index.html page in your browser. Now let's do that. It actually did a pretty decent job with this. It didn't miss any of the instructions I just gave it. So that's actually cool to see. So for our last set, I'm going to create a blank project directory, and this time I'm going to populate the gemini.md file. I'm going to give it instructions there, and once I start up Gemini, I'm going to ask it to create an event node tool, and we'll see if it can actually follow all the instructions in gemini.md and create the web app without needing any further modification or anything else from us. So let's just head over to our IDE. Okay, so we have our Gemini.md already set up. Okay, so we have single HTML file with embedded CSS and JavaScript. We also asked it to use modern vanilla JavaScript tier 6 with event delegation patterns. So responsive flat design using CSS grid and Flexbox. Local storage persistence for data management. So that's what we're using to store our notes. Now add, edit, delete, and mark to-dos as complete. Time-based features, due dates, reminders, time track. Technical implementation, we have use modern JavaScript features, async awaits, destructing template literals, implement event delegation for efficient DOM manipulation. State management with observable pattern, the bounced search functionality, CDN dependencies, Tailwind CSS font awesome, or Lucid icons, then Google Fonts, Inter or similar modern fonts. Okay, we have custom features, Pomodoro, timer integration, task analytics, and productivity insight, keyboard shortcuts for power users, offline first approach with service worker. Now, at the end, we are saying create the complete application in a single HTML file with all functionality working, including comprehensive comments explaining the architecture and implementation decisions. Now, I don't think it can achieve all this. I doubt it can actually achieve all this, but let's see what it actually does. Let's see what it actually comes up with. Now let's launch Gemini. Okay, it's authenticating and it's using one gemini.md file. Now let's paste in our prompt, create a comprehensive event-based to-do web application. Let's see if it will actually use the gemini.md for its design decisions. Always allow. So let's skip till the end. So it's finally done creating our event to-do web app. So we can open index.html. As you can see, it said it left a comprehensive comment block at the top of index.html. Let's open it. Anyways, overall architecture and implementation decisions. This application is designed as a single HTML file encapsulating all necessary HTML, CSS, and JavaScript HTML structure, semantic HTML5 structure with clear sections of header, main content, to-do list, and Pomodoro timer. Key features, CRUD operations. So we're going to be testing out the CRUD operations. We'll also see if it can actually do the drag and drop for reordering the to-do, and also import exports to export the to-dos in JSON format, providing data portability. So let's open it up in our browser. So we have our event-based to-do app here. Let's see if the date picker works. It does actually work. We can set priority high. Okay, it's not actually doing anything. Let's inspect and see. So we have a syntax error here, which we can actually correct, but so I wonder why we didn't actually check for syntax errors. Anyways, let's go back, let's refresh, and let's select a new date, select some high priority, let's add. Okay, it actually works. Not bad, not bad. So let's click on start. Let's see if it will start. That's not bad. Force, reset. Okay, that's really cool. Let's set this to 1 minute. Let's see what happens at the end. So it says work session finished. Not bad. It actually gave us an alert, and the break is 5 minutes. So it started the break. That's really cool. Okay, let's check this. That's cool. Let's refresh this. So it still has our to do, but it has actually reset the Pomodoro timer. Now you can ask the Gemini CLI agent to update that. But apart from the syntax error, we didn't have any other problems. Let's try deleting it. That's cool. Let's refresh. So it actually removed it. And let's create a new one and we'll try to export it. So we gave it medium priority. Let's export. So we have a JSON file. Let's open it up in our IDE. Okay. We have date 12th of July set to medium priority tags. Really cool with the random ID. That's nice. Now let's actually delete this. And let's refresh. Just let's import. So we've actually imported the to-dos successfully. Let's see if it showed up. It does show up. That's really cool. The exact due date. So I think everything actually works really well. So it's really cool to see that it didn't actually miss the mark on this one. Apart from the rookie mistake it made with the single quotes and single quotes without an escape. It actually did a pretty decent job, especially with these two features. It did a pretty decent job. So let's head back to our IDE. So another thing you can actually play around with are the tools. And these are the tools that are available to the Gemini CLI agent. We have the read folder, read file, edit, write file. These are important tools that it actually uses to execute on whatever task you hand over to it. Just like when we handed over the landing page task, it's use the Google search, or I think it's the Google search or the web fetch to get the pixels image for the HD background. So it actually did that, and that was really cool. Also, we have the shell command, making directories and folders and running whatever scripts you actually need to run, like npm run and npm build, things like that, which are really important to developers. And if you want to learn more about the tools, you can head over to the GitHub repo. Over here, go to docs and then head into tools. Now we can see the index.markdown. This is just a brief overview of this Gemini CLI tools. And here are the built-in tools, the file system tools like the edits, reading, writing, listing, searching, things like that. And also the shell tool. Then we have the web search tool and also the web fetch tool. So another cool thing is the memory tool. You can just pass in facts or update its memory, give it instruction you want to actually be persistent. And another thing I won't be covering in this video are the MCP servers and the sandboxing. I'm really not interested in MCP servers at all. So if you're someone that's actually interested in that, you can just link it up to your Gemini CLI agent. And maybe instead of using the web search or web fetch tool to get an image for your landing page, you could just generate a new image using the Imaging 4 by Google or DAL-E from OpenAI. So it's definitely up to you. Anyways, if you head over to the memory tool, can just use this, pass in the facts. And since this agent actually uses natural language, you can just tell it to save stuff to memory and it will do it automatically. It will run this for you. But if you want to run this directly, you can just copy this and pass in your facts. It's really straightforward. Now let's head back to our IDE. I have one final test. I know I actually said the last test was the final test, but this is the final test because I want to pass in an image to Gemini CLI agent and see if it can use that image as the reference to create a new landing page. So it's a very, really simple test. Let's see how well it actually performs. So let's head back to our IDE, and this time I'm going to open a different project directory. Okay, so this is the image I'm going to be passing in. So as you can see in the hint, type your message or add to the file path. So we've passed in the image. That's the image that's in our root directory, and we can tell it to use. Okay, we're saying use this image as reference to create a beautiful HTML landing page with custom CSS and matching images. Make sure the UI matches the reference image provided. As you can see, we're using Gemini 2.5 Pro. That's good. Let's run it. And it's now switching to Gemini 2.5 Flash. I am not interested in Gemini 2.5 Flash. I really wanted to use Gemini 2.5 Pro. So we've stopped it. And since I want to actually use Gemini 2.5 Pro, I'm going to switch to my API key. So I'm going to skip this part until I've actually done all that. Okay, now let's run it. I have switched to my API key instead of the usual Google Auth. Okay, it's using Gemini 2.5 Pro and it's working. So we'll come back once it's done. So it's finally done with the task we gave it. Now we can open index.html in our browser. So as you can see, this is what it actually generated, and it's pretty cool. It actually missed the image for some reason. Okay, said Noema AI, smarter conversations begin with Noema, engaged in meaningful, intelligent chats powered by Noema. So let's check the image. So it's Noema AI, as you can see. Smarter conversations begin here with Noema. It did a pretty decent job. Let's see. It gave the navigation by border radius, which is really cool, and it also centered it and gave it a background color. Also added the get started button, which is cool. Let's scroll down. 98%, 6K plus, 5K plus. Let's head back to the browser. So 98%, 6K plus, 5K plus. Not bad. Let's look at the footer. Okay, these are some of the pricing, startup plan, experience. It actually did a pretty decent job. I actually thought it wouldn't actually get anywhere with it. So it actually did a pretty decent job apart from the images. So these are damaged images. It only got the SVG. But if you'd like, you can ask it to use the external links of those images it tried downloading onto our project directory. That's something you can actually do. But what I wanted to see is if they gave it access to the multimodality of Gemini 2.5 Pro and if it can take the text and all that to create a landing page or just a web page. And I do know that UI design is not Gemini 2.5 Pro's strong suit or any of the Gemini family of models strong suit. I think Claude is actually better at that. But it actually passed this test because the aim of this test wasn't about looks. because I know it would actually fail. I set the bar so low because I know it won't actually get there. The main thing is, can it actually use that image as a reference? So once the underlying model gets better at UI generation, then it's definitely going to do a much better job. So that was just the aim of this final test. So I'm definitely impressed when it comes to how it actually performed on this final test. And as you can see, the Gemini CLI is far more than just a simple command line tool. It's a true AI agent. I do think it's a true AI agent because it has access to tools, and you can use these tools through, or you can use this particular agent through the command line. That's just the difference. And I do think it's a really cool tool for developers and would be better once the underlying model gets way much better at most of these tasks. So that's just what I'm actually looking forward to, a more better Gemini model. That's just what I'm looking forward to. Now that we've actually covered all the basics I'm actually interested in, that's going to be it for this part of the video. And do not forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon if you want to be notified when the second part of this video is released on this channel. So thank you for watching. Have a nice one.